All right. Well, welcome to our first governance success story webinar. It's an absolute pleasure today to be here with Dr. Ralph Kuhn from Alight. Hi, Ralph. As a partner of Rencore, Alight have been the very early adopters of Rencore Governance. They've been with us here from the very beginning as we were in the early stages of development. They've given us valuable feedback for the development of the Rencore Governance tool. For those of you within the webinar who are not sure, haven't seen Rencore Governance previously, don't worry, we will be giving a demo of the tool during this webinar at some point. Well, perhaps to kind of set the stage, first of all, I'll hand it over to you, Ralph, to give a little bit more background. Perhaps you could start by informing us about what it is you do and what it is that Alight does.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. I'm very happy that I was invited to this talk, and maybe a little bit to me. My name is Ralph Kuhn. I have a background. I studied physics, did my PhD a long time ago, and then went to IT. Already do .NET and SharePoint stuff since, I would say, 15 years almost. And yeah, we as a company, as Alight, we are not as old. We are almost 10 years old, and we started with SharePoint, like a lot of companies, in 2012, and of course then Office 365 came up, and more and more people were going to Office 365, and that's where we shifted our focus from the classic SharePoint on-premise installations to the now a little more complex environment of Microsoft 365.
Okay, and that's kind of already shifting to kind of the topic at hand here. So basically, as an introduction, maybe if you could kind of describe to us how is it you know more directly how you became involved in M365 technologies, and at what point basically you know governance became a topic that you could no longer ignore, essentially. Yeah.
So we started at Alight already since 2012 to use Office 365, so almost from the beginning. So we've seen it evolving over the time. So it started with simple things like email and SharePoint, and Teams came around, and Planner came around, and more tools came around, and also more and more people were using the Microsoft, or at this time Office 365 environment. And what we see, it got more and more crowded with a lot of apps, and people will start using the apps, which is very nice because Microsoft provides a complete ballpark of tools which you can use. But what we've seen with our customers, that more and more they lost control. So some people used the Planner, some people used To Do, some people used Teams, others SharePoint. And that was the moment when we've seen that, okay, we need a little more governance over this and need to see what happens there and what are the things which we need to look at. And yeah, that was the idea. It was maybe just, it was pretty easy in the former SharePoint times. You only had SharePoint, and it was not so difficult to put some governance there. But with a lot of tools in Microsoft 365, that's what the moment where we've seen, okay, we need more governance here.
And so obviously, as you're hinting at here, you've obviously got a long history from the early days of .NET and SharePoint. In terms of adoption of Microsoft 365, perhaps just talking about the market that you're based in, I'll be presuming that would be Germany. Were there any hesitations to going into the cloud or adoption, that challenges that you had to overcome?
Yep, sure. I would say we in Germany were quite late with adopting Office 365. I think it has a lot to do with security and compliance issues or topics which people were not sure. Is it good to get my data into the cloud? Are they safe? Are they in the European Union or in the US? Who can access my data? So for quite some time, it was the people got there step by step, but really slowly. We've seen it in other countries where we as Alight are as well, like France. It was much quicker, or Switzerland or the northern countries was much quicker there. But that's the but. we've seen a big boost in the last year because of the COVID-19. A lot of our customers, which hesitated before and said, no, I don't want to go to the cloud, which really started with Teams in, I don't know, 10 days or something like this.
And so now their hand is kind of forced because of COVID-19 that they have to kind
of
look at that.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, perfect. So now that we're in the cloud, we've had COVID-19. Now we're all in the cloud. So what are the challenges that we're currently facing? Do organizations, from your point of view, that are new in the cloud or face a different set of challenges, for instance, from those that have been there for a while?
For sure. I think the people which are already there for a while, we have a customer which is there for, I don't know, the last 5 or 6 years. For them, it was not completely new, but especially the people which were going very quickly to Teams. The knowledge was not there with the IT and with the people using Teams, and most of the companies just switched on Teams and then used it. And we did security checks with them and later showed them, there are a lot of guest access. Look how many guest users you have, and it was really like, what did we do? And it's really important from my point of view, even if you go quickly to the cloud, that afterwards you do some checks on all your settings, all your data, on all the security to be sure that not things happen in your environment which you don't want.
Okay. All right. So a lot of what you're saying is because obviously Rencore Governance is a relatively new tool. A lot of what you're obviously discussing would have been prior to Rencore Governance. So how did you overcome some of these challenges in the early days that you're kind of mentioning here, or what were basically the methods that you saw being implemented by others to overcome these challenges?
Yeah. So some people try to do, let's say, a similar strategy like we had in SharePoint. For instance, the Teams is a typical topic. That they said, okay, in SharePoint, it was a centralized approach. If someone wants to have a SharePoint site, he has to write some ticket or email or whatsoever to the administration, and then they will create a SharePoint site. And that was more or less governance because nobody could create something without anybody knowing. Some people tried this to do, and it's possible, but it's a lot of work for the administrators because you cannot only create Teams, you can create SharePoint sites, Planner, all the tools I mentioned before. And if you each time ask your administrator, then it will be a lot of work for your administrator. So some people tried this, but it's it's not working well for a long time, so to say.
Very manual, long approach there, it sounds like. Okay, now we obviously have Rencore Governance, which is still a comparatively new tool. It was only launched this year, but I'm guessing to you, because as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, you were a very, very early adopter of Rencore Governance. The benefits to you were quite obvious. So even during the days that you were testing it prior to launch, you could see the benefits right there, and you've already sold the tool to a number of your clients. So what are the biggest benefits that you could see of using Rencore Governance to begin with? Just general, broad benefits that you could see.
Yeah. So the biggest and the first and the quickest benefit you see is when you start scanning with Rencore Governance your Office 365 tenant, is that you have all information in one place. So there's no information in Rencore Governance which you couldn't get somehow in Office 365. You can get all the information, they are there, but you have to go to the Teams Admin Center, to the SharePoint Admin Center. You have to write PowerShell scripts. You have to go to the Azure Active Directory. So it was really quite often we had some demand from, let's say, the security officer. I need a report on this and that. I need to see what are the guest users doing. And it was always like, where can we find this information? Or do I have to write a PowerShell script to get this information? And that was really, for me, the easiest way. If I have Rencore Governance, I see everything. I can click through. I don't need a big knowledge on the customer, on the structure. I don't know what they set up in governance, but I can quite easily and quickly see what they do.
Okay, excellent. Maybe actually at this point in time, maybe we should dive into the demo a little bit earlier than perhaps we intended, if that's okay with you, Ralph. And maybe we should bring in Bjorn, because you've just described Rencore Governance, and maybe there's some people sitting in on the webinar who haven't actually seen it. But let's bring in Bjorn Erkens, who can then give a perhaps a 10 to 15-minute demo of the Rencore solution, and we will get back and carry on with the success story, because then I think it'll well, people will then better understand when we start talking about a tool-based governance approach from then on. So let's switch to Bjorn, and let's have a demo of the tool right now, actually.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Great to meet you again, Ralph. So actually, Ralph was one of our the first people I talked to in the early days. So it's always really nice to think back. All right, then let me bring up my screen and give you guys a very short overview so that you get some context here for the viewers that maybe didn't see the tool so far. Let me just share my screen with you guys. Can you see it? Is it up for you?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yep, up for me, so I'm guessing up for other people.
All right, perfect. Okay, so like Ralph described, what is the early benefit of using a tool like Rencore Governance is we aggregate the managing or the governance of the different Microsoft services in one platform, right? So with us currently, you can govern Power Automate, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Microsoft 365 groups, Power Apps, and Azure AD. And now as we go on, because we just launched mid-February, as we go along, now we start adding the other Microsoft services. So I think either this month or next month, we will add, for example, Exchange Online, and then we just go forward with the other Microsoft services. So you have 4 different sections within Rencore Governance. Currently, we're looking at dashboards. What we hear over and over again from people that use us are they see 6 main use cases when it comes to governance. Costs, they want to have the cost aspects under control, meaning license management, meaning where do I run into SharePoint storage capacity, these kind of things. External access, everyone wants to know who are guests that I have in Teams or in SharePoint and when can I get rid of them. Declutter, what are unused resources do I have, kind of where do I have unused SharePoint sites, where do I have unused Teams and these kind of things, so kind of this lifecycle management discussion. How can I archive them and so on. And then operations, where do I currently run into issues? For example, where do I have flows that have errors and these kind of things? And so we provide them with a lot of dashboards concerning these information, which people can then share out automatically with their stakeholders. This overview dashboard that we're currently looking at is kind of the cockpit for the user, and it consists of inventory data and checks data. What are checks? In our language, these are the governance rules that people want to stay on top of for their tenant. So here in this example, we see 80% of this particular tenant, which is a demo tenant, is compliant, 20% seem to cause issues, and here we see these issues on the right-hand side under violations. So we have, for example, 19 high-severity violations, 285 million. If I click on them, this brings me to our checks overview page, in which we see, seems that these governance rules have been defined, and we see violations to these. Where do these checks or governance rules come from? How can I add them to the system? If I click Add Check, this brings us to our checks template library. And here we have pre-built a lot of different governance rules that we have figured out together with all of the, I think I had more than 350 calls with different organizations, in which we always ask what are the most important governance rules, and then we collect them and then build the ones out as a quick start for the user so that they can start early on and in a very easy way with their governance approach. So for example, I'm interested in teams with very few owners as a rule. I would click this, and that would bring us to our check builder, in which we now have this pre-populated logic of this check because we come out of this template, right? So report a violation for every team that has less than or equal 1 owner. And then I can either take this logic as is, or through clicking add filters, I can customize this rule to my needs. So I could filter here for this primary object team I could filter for my secondary object owner. I could put more related objects to it. And then in the next step, I would give this check a title and a description and categorize it and then get it live. And then as we are running continuous scans over the tenant, we bring back violations of these checks, and then people can work with these violations. Obviously, people cannot only use our pre-built checks, but they can also create custom checks, meaning they could start from scratch working with these checks. Now let's come back here. So now let's assume we have now built out these checks, and now we see violations. And now we have two ways of dealing with these violations. Let's stick with this example, teams with very few owners. The first one is an automated approach. So I can add automations to each check that I bring into the system. And then that lets me build out sequences in which I can not only send emails or send Teams messages to inform someone that something goes wrong, but I can also do actions like I can enforce my governance plan by, for example, automatically assigning a person as a new team owner or kicking out guests off a SharePoint site and all of these different things. We also have a manual approach of looking at the check violations. So here we see we have two check violations for this particular check. I can see the teams that have violated the checks. I can see that both of them only have one team owner. This is the guy here in this example. I can jump to the team or show it in the admin center directly, and I can explore more here towards the object within the inventory of Rencore Governance. Let's come briefly, and here exploring means I can see the related objects of this particular team. I can see the properties all in one place, and I can export all of this data as kind of the data sheet if I want to manually do a discussion around that. Then we have inventory, which is what Ralph mentioned also, the aggregation of all data in one platform, right? So you don't want to go necessarily to 14 different admin centers to see all your data, but here now you get all the aggregated data for the services from Microsoft that you're interested in. Then you can work with the data, you can build out different views on the data, you can interact with that. But as I only give you a brief overview, that should do it for now. And then if you're interested to try it out, you can try it out yourself or reach out to us and we can show you in a one-on-one call. So I guess that does the trick from my side. Back to you, Charles and Ralph.
Okay, thanks, Bjorn. Yeah, okay. Then we can continue with the interview with Ralph. So that gives us a good, well, people here a good understanding at least of the tool that we're talking about, Rencore Governance. So the next question, now that we've seen the demo of Rencore Governance, it may seem like an obvious question, Ralph, but I'm not too sure if it is, so I may as well throw it out there anyway. Is a tool-based governance approach the best way? Are there instances when this could possibly be achieved by other means? And I mean, is it a problem for enterprises, or is it? But you get what I'm saying. I mean, do you always need to go with a tool-based governance approach, or can you do an alternative means?
Yes, there's always one other approach, and this is the one I already mentioned from the other question before, is that you try to do governance upfront, meaning you restrict from the beginning. So that's what, as I said, that's what the typical way in SharePoint, restrict what the people are allowed to do, restrict who is allowed to create a team, restrict who is allowed to create a SharePoint, set up a lot of quotas, don't allow external users. So if you restrict your Office 365 enough, then it's possible to do governance without a tool. But on the other hand, you have this Microsoft 365 environment. You paid for all these tools.
You've invested in it, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, you invested it in, and then you should also use them. And I think it's much better to let people try and use, because that's what they also do in their private lives. They, oh, there's a new app. I try it out. Does it help me or not? If not, I don't use it. If yes, I try to use it. And the same approach comes from Microsoft 365. And then people will be much more productive because they find the tool which fits best for them. And if I do this, then I need some kind of tool to take care of what happens and to see what happens and what is used. And maybe if I still need some more restrictions or some checks or some violations of the checks. And for me, that's the much better approach, because it lets people freely choose what to use and then try to govern with the tool.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, the age-old topic of empowering basically the users and making the most of your Microsoft 365 technologies, as you said, that you've invested in. So the clients that we have worked with, Alight, together with Rencore, they come from a very different background. So this already answers the question that whatever sector you come from, whether you're in a tech, manufacturing, financial, agricultural background, there is a potential that you could need governance. That doesn't really relate. You've proven that by your clients that are using Rencore Governance. However, what I'm looking for here is maybe concrete examples. So just so the audience can understand, for you to give concrete examples, the kind of customers that you have and any use cases in particular that you can share with us.
Yeah. So I brought two examples. I couldn't name the customers, but I can give you at least a rough idea of what they do. And I think what is interesting as well is in which stage they are in implementing Office 365. So I had one customer with working worldwide with roughly 1,500, 1,600 employees. It's a production company. They create 3D printers. And they started with Office 365 only 1 year ago. So they were quite lucky to implement Teams just before the COVID crisis. And they are, of course, in the beginning, it's always easy because people start working, people start using things, and usually you don't have a problem. But there I could see that after half a year, maybe now 1 year, because they use it for 1 year, things are growing. You get more and more teams. You have now, I don't know the exact number. It might be something around 1,000 teams.
You were there from the beginning to witness basically
I was there
growth.
From the beginning. I can see it all. People start using OneDrive, even if you don't say anything, they start using OneDrive. And then we came up with the Rencore Governance tool, and then they had the first idea on what people are really doing. They said, "Oh, we know the number of teams, but we don't know how big are the SharePoint sites." Or we've seen people with really large OneDrives. We didn't know that people use OneDrive that much. And of course, they first started to restrict a little bit. That's not growing too much for their backup and restore process. But it was really a wow effect when they first used Rencore to see what people are really doing. So this was one example where people are quite new, let's say, in the Office 365 business. The other example.
And just to finish off with them, so they didn't implement, as you said previously, upfront governance restricted. They kind of just let everybody do what they want, minor restrictions, as you said, and then
So there was some governance. So not everybody was able to create a team. There was a process in place. So we have a list of all teams. So there is some kind of governance, but of course it only gives you an idea on what happens and not all the things people are really doing. What was also very important for them, they didn't restrict it on guest users. So it was from the beginning the goal to work a lot with other companies. They have a lot of suppliers or people they work together with. They wanted to have it quite open. And it was also good to see for them, where do we have any guest users which access? So you can see the list of guest users in Azure Active Directory. But if you really want to know what the guest user has access to, which team, it costs you a little more time to see it. And it's quite easy in the Rencore tool. So for them, it's really a good tool to see on what happens. And then the next step was that we started to implement our own checks. So what Björn said, so some minor things that we said, if the OneDrive gets more than, 50 gigabytes, then let's give it the warning. So we started small things, and I think the next step will be to have more checks and also maybe some automation to be in place. Then that we don't have to look each week or each day what happens, but get informed from the system when things happen or go wrong.
Okay, no, good, excellent. Glad to hear that they're using the tool and customizing it as it should be to suit their specific business needs. And what was the you said you had another use case that you'd like to share with it, or use case success story, should I say?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The second customer is a little bit bigger. He's, as you said, in the agriculture business, so he's producing seeds, and we have roughly 4,000 to 5,000 users, so it's a little bit bigger. It's international, the same, but they were already using Office 365. I would say around 5 to 6 years. So I wasn't there from the beginning, and of course, if you use Office 365 with more people, much longer, a lot more things happen. So when we first set up Rencore and did a check with the governance tool, they were really impressed, or I was impressed to see how many flows people can have. I think they have something around 700, 800, 900 flows running in their system, and how many power apps you can have. So you see, this is a customer who already evolved from the let's start with Teams and do a little bit of intranet to, oh, I really want to use the platform and I want to use more and more of the platform. And of course, for them, it was also interesting to see the Teams and the SharePoint size. They've seen that they have SharePoint sites with more than 1 terabyte of data. That was very interesting for them to see, because it's also question of governance. If the SharePoint, well, it's not a problem in SharePoint anymore like before, but still you want to know what happens there and why they accumulate so many data, because at some point you have to pay for the storage. Yeah. And so for them it was more like, oh wow, what do we have already, and what shall we do now? And they already have teams which do SharePoint. They have now set up a team doing Power Platform governance, and yeah, I think it was quite an eye opener for them to see what they have.
And okay, an eye opener for them to see. I mean, was there any kind of a specific time when you're showing them the tool? Because you're obviously trying to position a tool-based approach with these clients. Was there a specific moment of realization that this is going to make life a lot easier for us? Was there an aha moment, as you said, the eye-opening moment in particular when you're showing the tool, or was it pretty obvious once they'd run the first scan and they're able to look at the data?
Yeah. It was actually after the first scan. So we did the first scan. We looked 1 hour on what is in the tool, and yeah, and that's the very good thing about Rencore Governance. It can be set up in 5 minutes, 10 minutes maximum. Then you do the first scan. It may take some time if you have a large environment with a lot of data. The first time may take several days, but then you see everything, and it's you have the 30 days trial, so which means you can see everything without paying anything. So you just see, and then you can see if it's good for, is it information which I need, or is it, well, I already have all the information somewhere else. But I haven't seen anybody who said, oh, I have this information already at hand. So
okay, and going back to people who have invested in their Microsoft 365 technologies, it could be the case that perhaps something you have to justify to some of your clients, perhaps when it comes to a tool-based approach. So I've invested in my Microsoft 365 technologies. Why is it that we need tooling on top of this? So what is your experience, for example, with the Microsoft Power Platform Center of Excellence, and how does Rencore compare or complement or support the Microsoft 365 technologies which people have invested in?
Yeah. So the Center of Excellence is from Microsoft. Maybe for the people who don't know this, it's a tool set, it's Power Apps, it's Power BI reports, it's flows, and it's completely free of charge. So you can download it from Microsoft, you can set it up in your system, and then you get a very good view on especially the Power Platform. So you see mainly the flows, you see the apps, if you use anything else like chatbots, and you can see very clearly what you do there. And I would say, sorry for that, but it has much more details like Rencore Governance right now. But it's
no problem.
It's more like
it's
more like a tool for the professionals, because the people we've seen were not able to set it up on their own, so they needed our help. And it took like I don't know, half a day or 1 day to set everything up running. It's not so easy to set up, and also you need updates from time to time. It's also not easy to do the updates, and then you have all the data. You need to start learning on where to look, because you have everything, but it could be sometimes overwhelming. So you really need to know what you look for to find it. So I would call it more like a really expert tool when I'm interested really deeply into the Power Platform. And comparable, when I look at Rencore Governance, I have a much wider overview over all the tools, not only Power Platform, but Teams, SharePoint, Azure Active Directory, all the tools, maybe not as deep in the Power Platform, but maybe that will come later in the involvement of Rencore Governance, but not as deep as the COE, but it's easy to use. It's easy to start, and it's easy to see things, and still I see the list of flows. I already see a lot, and if I then really interested in more details, I can head for the Center of Excellence there. That would be my approach.
Excellent. And one more question here. So you've been throughout this interview mentioning some of the Microsoft services that your customers typically use. So you've mentioned challenges that they face with Teams, the Power Platform, so on and so forth. Are they main challenges? Is they like a top 3 challenges that Alight deal with on a day-to-day basis, or could it be anything? It's just too random to tell. Or can you say, well, these are the main ones? Because we've identified some challenges. I don't know if you can relate to them. 6 actually. So costs, external user management, user offboarding, declutter, operations, and adoption. What would be yours, or are those pretty much the ones that you come across?
It's pretty much what people are needing when they regarding governance. But of course, if you want to have, let's say, that's what I said in the beginning about the people which started quickly with Teams and have no idea of their security settings. This is something, there's Rencore Governance tool is not the place to look for, because it doesn't show you, and it doesn't need to show you all the settings, because for this you have all the admin centers. So the first challenge we have with people coming to us and first using Office 365 is to check their system and to make it safe, at least in the first step. And then when we have safe, then we need to know what are the data, and are there different kind of data, different security classes of data they have in, they have external users. That's the moment when we start with Rencore Governance, and to see what's there, what do they use, and how can we make things better. For instance, saying, okay, if you have data inside which need to be more secured, wouldn't it be a good idea to use more tools of the Security and Compliance Center, sensitivity labels to encrypt your data? So this is usually then the next step we go with the customers, and then of course using the platform. That's the biggest challenge, because most of the customers I know just use Teams, and that's really a very small part of the platform you can use. And as I said, you already paid for.
Exactly, yeah. So you were kind of discussing your approach that you have with governance, but what makes a good governance plan in your opinion? So, is there anything that Alight does? I mean, do you have a governance workshop? Do you have some sort of structured approach? How do you implement a governance plan with
I think Charles dropped, so let me probably take over here for him. So I think what he was about to say is, sorry, Charles, now you're back. I was just about to cover for you. I think what you wanted to hear is what is your structured approach, Ralph, when it comes to governance? Do you offer governance workshops? What is the structured approach there?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we do. So we, as I said, we first check what is in place, if the customer already has some rules in place. As I said, sometimes as they don't know what to do, they restrict a lot, and that's the first step we do. That we show them, okay, first what is there, what is possible in the Office 365 environment. do we really need all the restrictions, or can we not do some governance and let people choose their tools? And then and this is usually a first workshop where we do the security check, and we also do some envisioning, we call it, to show people what to use, and then also how to keep governance on these tools. So Rencore Governance is a tool where they can see, but usually, yeah, it's a good point to go with Rencore Governance if they already have something in place and they already evolved. So it's not something I would start with. I switch on the tenant and I install Rencore Governance as a second step, because but yeah, most of the people come already to us using for half a year or for a year. They already have some 500 teams and they are not sure if they do everything correct.
They're already aware at that stage that
exactly.
something's getting out of control here, and we need to get it under control.
And our approach is, as I said, first do the security check to make really sure that all the settings are in place in a way that how the people like it, if they want guest users or not, if they want to let people share anonymous links. Nobody knows that that's by default possible to share an anonymous link to everybody in the world, and all these kind of settings need to be in place in the first step. And then when we are safe, then we go to the governance part. We can install Rencore Governance, and then we look into the data and see how we can structure things more, where to look at, create checks, maybe set up some automation. To have some automatic email, or well, we didn't do any Azure functions up to now, but it would be a nice thing to do these, to have some automatic cleanup, for instance, if things get too big or anything like this. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, approaching towards the end of the webinar, and maybe we can have a few minutes for questions at the end. But perhaps I'll leave kind of the final say with you. I mean, it's been a pleasure working with you with the Rencore Governance tool. But if you had to say anything at all, and I like to do this on governance, regardless of the Rencore Governance tool, what would it be? Whatever it would be that to sum it up.
Yeah. So take care of governance, take care of security, and please do the approach, use all the tools at hand, and do the check with the governance. Don't go the restriction way, so to say.
Okay, excellent. So no upfront restrictions. Empower the users. Thanks. Okay, thanks for attending the webinar. Were there any questions? There was one which came up. And I believe it was answered. Okay, perfect. Can we use the government framework as well to support our DLP ideas? No strictly confidential data in public cloud, e.g. in combination with AIP and MCAS? And the answer was, hi, Andreas, this is definitely on our roadmap. Expected time of arrival for this is end of 2021, early 2022. Okay, that was the only question that came up for the webinar. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and catch you next time in another success webinar. And Ralph, it's been a pleasure having you.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.